One of the most confusing aspects about applying to Cambridge, and unsurprisingly, one of the most popular queries that I receive, is what exactly is the collegiate system and how exactly do I navigate it? How on earth do you go about picking a college? I'm going to try and answer this by breaking it down into a couple of questions. Right? I'm going to talk about the collegiate system overall. I'm going to talk about open applications. I'm going to talk about how you might want to go about picking different colleges, how I came to pick my own college, and finally about the pooling system. I'm Gavyn. I'm a third-year chemical engineer at Cambridge, and let's dive straight into it. Cambridge is what's known as a collegiate university, which means that it's comprised of the different departments and faculties together with the individual colleges. What exactly are their respective roles and how do they all fit in to form the overall university? The way that I like to think of it is by considering the split to be between academics and pastoral care. When we talk about academics, I'm talking about things like your lectures, your practicals, and your exams. And these are all typically going to be handled by your department. So in theory, your choice of college really isn't going to have that much of an impact on the overall degree that you receive, because that's moderated independently by the department that you're working with. Your college, on the other hand, is probably going to be more involved when it comes to your pastoral care, meaning that they're going to be the people providing you with accommodation, with halls for food, with various sports and recreational facilities and things like that. And your college is going to be where you're going to spend most of your time when you're not in your department learning. Now, this split isn't entirely accurate, and there's a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, your director of studies, who's basically placed to oversee you through your course and make sure that you're doing okay on the academic side of things, is typically organized through your college, and different colleges are going to have different directors of studies. The same is true for supervisions, which are typically, again, organized by the college. And this does mean that, in theory, some colleges could have a better pool of supervisors than another, or certain academics who you really want to learn from reside at one college or teach at one college but not another. And I know of people who apply to certain colleges because of these reasons, but overall, I don't think it's a significant factor that you should be basing your choice of college on. It's, in practice, not really going to make a significant difference. However, as with everything, there's exceptions to the rule. If your course is small enough, then it probably doesn't make sense for each college to have its own team of supervisors and things like that. So chemical engineering, it's a fairly small course. Right now there's about 44 students per year group, and therefore my supervisions and whatnot are all organized by the department as well. So there's a lot of nuance. It depends on the specific circumstances how exactly this all works out in practice. Cambridge has a grand total of 31 colleges, of which 29 take applications from undergraduates. There's 3 colleges that admit only mature students, so this means that you would be 21 or over at the time that you start your studies. And there's 2 colleges that consider applications from female applicants only. So the question then is, how exactly do you decide which college you want to send your application to? Because remember that when you apply to Cambridge, you're actually applying to one of the colleges, not to the overall university, and each college has its own admissions team. The answer to that, if you're someone who's particularly lazy or you just don't really care, is that you don't have to, because there's something called an open application, which basically means that you send your application in and you let a computer decide which college your application gets sent to. And the way it does this is by looking at which colleges have received fewer applications than normal for a given subject in a particular year, and it'll send your application to that college in order to help balance things out a little bit. Does this really affect your chance of getting in? The official answer, at any rate, is no. But let's say that you're someone who actually wants to decide between your colleges. You want to have a bit more agency in the final outcome. How exactly do you go about that? I think before I go into this, there's a couple of things that's worth pointing out. Firstly, it's that very few people actually end up regretting their choice of college, or regretting which college they end up getting in, which might be different to the college that they've applied to, and more on this in the section on pooling later on in the video. Because realistically, it doesn't really make that much of a difference to your overall experience, which college you're in. Most people end up loving the college that they're in, one way or the other. So it's not something that you should really stress out too much about. You'll probably end up leaving Cambridge thinking that your college is the best one that there could be. First off, there's a few screening criteria that you can use to help narrow down your list initially. Ask questions like, do you want to apply to a female-only college, or do you want to apply to a mature college? And if the answer is yes, then you've significantly narrowed down your list. There's only a handful of colleges that meet those criteria, and your job just became much easier. Another few things to look out for are, 1, does your college offer the course that you're applying for? This typically isn't a problem for the bigger courses like natural sciences or engineering, but when it comes to smaller, slightly more niche courses, some colleges simply won't allow you to apply for them to that college. So that can help you screen out some of these colleges early on in the process. Another thing to look out for is entry requirements. While this isn't necessarily going to vary significantly between colleges, some colleges might have certain additions to the typical offers that you might need to make. For example, when I was applying for chemical engineering, there were certain colleges that required further maths as a compulsory subject at A levels, and other colleges that didn't really mind whether you had further maths or not. So this is important to look into as well, just to make sure that you're not caught out unawares. Now that you've narrowed down your list a little bit, let's look into the more subjective part of this, which is going to be based on things like facilities and location and whatnot. Now, I would recommend not making a list of every single college and their pros and cons, because that's a lot of research and it's pointless. What I would recommend you do instead is start off by making a list of the things that you think are essential in a college. Like, for example, is it going to be one that's centrally located, like Trinity or Johns? Or is it going to be one that's a bit further away from the city centre, like Homerton or Girton? Is it a college that's big, like Homerton? Or is it going to be a relatively small college, like Trinity Hall? These are factors that are going to, they're probably going to have some impact on your studies. Smaller colleges, for example, are seen as more friendly, you get to know your year group better, but bigger colleges are going to have better access to things like funding, which again is another significant thing to consider, because different colleges have different funding opportunities available to students. Some colleges are more liberal with giving grants and things like that, whereas other colleges don't necessarily have as much money on offer to students, even when it comes to things like financial hardship funds and things like that. So that's something that's really worth looking into. I'd say there's a couple of other things that you might want to look at. Facilities, for example. Do you want a college with a pool? Quite rare in Cambridge. Do you want one with a music room or certain sports facilities? These are all things that are going to feed into your final list of potentially acceptable colleges. And once you've narrowed it down to this list of maybe 5-6 colleges, at that point I'd say you can start doing in-depth research into each of these different colleges. I'd say the best place to start doing this is having a look at the college website. They've got lots of information. Some of them have tours for prospective applicants, which can be useful for simply getting a feel for these colleges. And there's a wealth of other resources online. Go on blogs, watch other vloggers on YouTube who talk about their experiences at university and at colleges and review different things. Getting a student perspective is going to be much nicer than reading the prospectus that the college has put out for you, basically. Now, it's important to do this kind of research because some things aren't as they seem. For example, Trinity Hall is a fairly central college, at least that's what they tell you. But the second you dig a little bit deeper, you realize that they've got a lot of their accommodation outside of the centre of Cambridge. In my second year, I ended up living maybe a 15 or 20-minute walk away from the centre of Cambridge. I didn't really mind this because I was on my bike all the time. It's a 5-minute cycle, but it's if you applied to a college because it's central and then you find that the actual living spaces aren't quite so central, it's not ideal. So just do as much research as you can once you've narrowed it down to those 5 or 6 colleges, just to make sure that there's nothing that you're going to be caught unawares by. And this brings me to how I came about picking my college. The answer to this is that I didn't really have much in terms of what I was looking for. I wanted a college that was fairly central. I wanted a college that was fairly small. And with these 2 criteria in mind, I started looking at colleges. I saw Trinity Hall. I saw the colors were black and white, which went quite well with my wardrobe at the time. And I saw that Stephen Hawking did his postgrad studies here, which, if it was good enough for Stephen Hawking, it was good enough for me. And the choice was made. I didn't really look into any other colleges all that much. I was just like, Trinity Hall seems great. I'm going to go there. And it turns out that I really lucked out because it is truly great. The food is some of the cheapest in Cambridge and also some of the best. And it's got some really nice sports facilities and things like that. So I'd say I managed to luck out with my choice. Finally, we're going to quickly touch on the pooling system, which is basically how you end up with an offer from a college that's different to the one that you applied to, as I alluded to early on in the video. And this is the case for more than 1 in 5 applicants. So they'll apply to a certain college, but their offer will come from a different college. Now, the pooling system really comes into play only when a college has already been oversubscribed for a certain course, but they then receive another application that they think is really good, that they would normally like to make an offer to, but they can't because they've already filled up all of their slots. What they'll do in this instance is they'll take that application and they'll put it into a pool that other colleges can then dip into and have a look at and, follow the normal application process. And the reason that they do this is because a college would much rather make an offer to a strong candidate who applied to a different college rather than one who applied directly to them but is of lesser quality. And this is sort of a system to ensure that the brightest applicants aren't necessarily disadvantaged by which college they apply to. So it helps sort of balance things out just a little bit. And that's basically it. That's, in a nutshell, the collegiate system and how exactly you can navigate it. So hopefully it's a bit clearer now. You'll realize that it's not something you need to stress out too much about, and that gives you a bit of clarity in how exactly you go about this. So don't stress out about this once again. Like I've said, it's not the end of the world. You will probably have a ball of a time, regardless of which college you end up applying to.